Times Radio's Brighter Breakfast with Asma Mir and Stig Abel.
Now, are you a fan of historic buildings?
Do you really want to hurt me? Do you really
And this?
want to make me cry?
I am a fan of both, actually, so this item is just for me. You'll be thrilled to know that Boy George and Culture Club are back doing a series of exclusive UK outdoor shows as part of the Heritage Live concert series for 2022. Now, I've been speaking to Boy George about some of the places that he'll be performing at.
Kenwood House is in Hampstead, which was where I lived for over 30 years, and it's a beautiful stately home. It's got outside grounds. All the places that we're doing are like heritage spaces. So, you know, it's a real family atmosphere. People picnic. Usually they do like kind of orchestral gigs, but in the last few years they've branched out into more pop music and soul. So we're doing 3 of those heritage gigs. We're also going to Doncaster. I don't know if people listen to you in Doncaster.
They do, everywhere.
We're coming to Doncaster, which I'm excited about. We're singing with Tony Hadley's there.
Wow.
You know, the kind of, icons.
This is my teenage years all over again. Are you going to be doing, how much of it is the older material, the good stuff, and how much of it is the new good stuff?
Well, I think all of our stuff is good stuff. Old, new, covers. I mean, because I take the view, I don't believe in new music. And people say, what do you think of new music? I'm like, is that old music?
Yeah.
Because everything already exists anyway. So to me, I think I would say to people, if I was a carpenter, you'd beg me to make you a table. I've been doing this a long time. I know how to do it. I'm good at it. And, I'm in a music business that everyone tries to tell you. Everyone's a self-appointed expert in the music business. People have never made a record, never been on stage, but they all tell you what you should be doing. I think at 60, I know what I'm doing. So just leave it to be people.
I grew up in the 80s listening to you. I'm 50 now, and I grew up listening to you. And I've been writing a bit about kind of my childhood and growing up and what it was like back then. And back then, it felt like simpler times. And I don't mean that through rose-tinted glasses, because it was a bit simpler. You could kind of, this was your view and all the rest of it. But at the same time, people, for me, lacked a lot of compassion if you were different in any way. And I'm obviously Asian, you're obviously gay. Back then, things were very different. Is there a time that was better? Was it then? Is it now? Or is it both of them?
I think, of course there were great times growing up. And yes, there was a lot of bullying. I mean, I experienced that myself. But, I don't necessarily think it's defined me. I mean, for many years I was super defensive. And I think that came from the sense of being attacked.
Yeah.
So you kind of arm yourself before you're even asked the question.
Yeah.
But as I've got older, I've practiced this thing called the 3 principles, mind, thought and consciousness, which is really a new way of looking at everything you feel on a minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis. So, if somebody insults you, well, you have to believe the insult for it to have any power. So if somebody says you're this, you go, well, yeah, that's what you think I am. But trust me, you're missing so much. And I think if you come in at that point of view, suddenly you're like, I don't want to listen to this person. Maybe I'll block them. But I don't believe what you believe. And by the way, whatever you're saying about me is not going to make any difference, because I'll still be me later.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like my reaction as an older man is to be more myself, not less myself. I think when you're a kid, for whatever reasons, you want to fold away and you want to sort of hide. And then there's a point where you realise, well, I can't ever not be who I am.
Yeah.
Whether it's being Asian or trans or a gay man or a lesbian or whatever it may be, anything disabled.
Yeah.
It's like if you have to live in a world that constantly pokes you, there's a point where you have to kind of go, well, this is who I am, and what I am is beautiful. And that's what's great about now, is that people are, you're seeing it so much in pop culture. Remember back in the 70s and 60s, 50s, pop culture told us a different message. Newspapers were able to say, is it a bird, is it a plane, is it a poof? They were able to put headlines saying, is it a poof with muscles and all of that.
Yeah.
And of course I also said things that were self-depreciating. And, I don't care about them. But I would say that I don't particularly feel that I'm defined by my past. I feel like I'm defined by who I am right now. What I feel right now is very different. Some of the stuff is the same. I think you're lucky if you grow older and become who you actually are.
Are we definitely freer then now, or does it depend who you are? Because, people are free now to say that they're trans, that they're gay, they're non-binary, whatever it might be. But then there are people who who are not part of that, who, you know, are perhaps more mainstream, if you want to call it that. You know, they're straight, they do this, they do that, and they feel excluded and a bit baffled by everything that's going on.
But that's a choice, isn't it? Like, to be baffled is a choice. To be upset about what someone else is kind of a madness. It's like.
But you know how you say that it's people's choice to be baffled? I suppose they would say, well, hang on a minute, we are the majority in this country, and it's not that we don't want gay people, trans people to exist. It's that we find it's a minefield. We don't know what to say. We don't know the right terminology.
Stop thinking about it. I mean, it's as simple as that, because it's got nothing to do with you whatsoever.
But if you interact with someone who's trans, you have to, you know, get their pronouns right and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you do. But then you also have to, you know, in you know, everyday life, you can't just walk up to someone and assume everything about them. Oh, you married? Oh, did your husband? You make mistakes all the time like that.
Yeah.
In the real world, if you want to call what you call the normal world. And also, I think, like, anyone who's kind of gay or trans or other has grown up in a sort of heteronormative family that has told them, actually very unsubtly sometimes, whatever you think you are is wrong. So you grow up in this kind of, it is like a sort of conversion therapy. It's subtle, but it's very effective. And it's not until you realise, oh, hold on a second, I'm a person in my own right and I have choices. And, you know, I can call myself this and I can call myself that, but actually I'm still working it out. So, you know, it's not, you have to look at it as more, not less. It's understanding more about people. It's not, you know.
Yeah.
And it depends why people are using those descriptions to describe themselves, because that's where they are in their life. And that can change.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to do that as well.
Now, I'm glad that you mentioned conversion therapy, because I was going to ask you about that. It's kind of the, you know, hot topic right now. Government being criticised because they're not going to include trans people in their ban on so-called conversion therapy. What did you make of that decision?
Well, I think it's a mistake. And, you know, you want leaders to be brave. You know, I don't really understand who they're frightened of upsetting. This is not America. You know, I don't feel like it's the same political structure, whereas in America, if you say something supportive of trans people, there's a backlash. I mean, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel like that here. You know, sometimes on the internet, it feels like there's a lot of bad opinion, but it's really only a few people. Actual people that you meet when you talk to them about it, they're very supportive. You know, they don't feel like that. And they've got no reason to feel like that. You know, ever since I was a kid, you know, I've been hearing about, you know, gay rights being the sort of, you know, demolishing normality, like we're coming on and we're going to ruin it all for everyone else. And it never happens. It never happens, because it doesn't need to happen. What actually needs to happen is the opposite. Is you, as the majority, need to accommodate this new way of behaving in the same way that men are now learning they can't treat women a certain way. You go on the tube now, there's signs. Don't stare at women. It's become part of the public consciousness that, you know, actually it's really intimidating if you're a beautiful woman or any type of woman and to be stared at by someone in a leering way. And, you know, unless you're told that and it is your experience, you don't necessarily see it. I mean, I've seen it, you know, in my life, you know, and I don't think it's a bad thing for people to be a bit more respectful, you know, a bit more sort of, you know, conscientious. That's what it's about, consciousness. You know?
Finally, I want to ask you about the kind of the big political stories of the story of the day, which has been running for ages, which of course is Partygate, Downing Street parties. Do you think that's something that we should be getting exercised about, or are there bigger things to worry about?
I do think listen, I think for the people that went through that experience of not being able to go to family funerals and losing loved ones, I mean, you know, it's awful. So let's acknowledge that that is one of the worst things about it. But I do kind of slightly buy the idea that it was a work environment, they're running the government and they were there, and you probably would have done that anywhere, you know. I think his mistake was just not really owning up in the beginning and just saying, I'm so sorry. I always feel like honesty, although it can be a curse, I think sometimes just saying, do you know what, I messed up. The sooner you know, do it, the better.
That was Boy George, and one of you has already texted, Boy George for Prime Minister.